Wait, are you
Oh.
aligned? Do you know David from Orchestrated Connections? Oh,
Different align.
okay.
We're going live on Instagram. Okay, so we are live. Welcome, everyone. This is What the Frack, where we bring you marketing tips, trends, and topics in 30 or so we try minutes, so you could do the creative stuff. We're your fractional team, and this week I'm super excited because every week we do these lives where we bring you a new part of our fractional team or a new part of your fractional team. And today I have an old friend on who, if you didn't know the Easter egg, this book has been sitting on my shelf in every one of our episodes. And if you haven't looked it up, you need to go find it. Impact, Christen Brandt. Brent? Yes.
Brent.
Okay. Brent. And we actually met first time I had a conversation with you. We were on a virtual Jeffersonian dinner during COVID. And I just remember being super blown away by everything you do. And I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thanks. Yeah, from around the dinner table to around the microphone.
Absolutely. So I like to start these things with a little bit of an unpopular opinion. And what you guys are going to kind of learn here, and in case you haven't realized, impact. We're talking today about how to build a business with mission and impact involved in that, and what that looks like, and how you can also incorporate that into your marketing plan. So my unpopular opinion is, when I was younger, I obviously wanted to be an entrepreneur. And my dad actually said to me one day, he's like, you want to save the world so much, you should go into nonprofit. You shouldn't be an entrepreneur. And I was like, challenge accepted. I think that we could save the world and be entrepreneurs and bring all of that together, and that business should be a part of that. So I assume you agree with me on that.
I do. I fully agree with you on that. So I did co-found a nonprofit. So I believe wholeheartedly in the nonprofit sector. But when the nonprofit sector acts alone, there's just not much that they can do, right? Like, the nonprofit sector needs the support of businesses. It needs the support of marketers and advertisers and supporters. And I think we can talk about this some more, but there's so many ways to create change no matter what sector you're in. And entrepreneurship, obviously, Nicole, you figured out, is a really great way to do it.
Yeah. And so, just in case you don't know Christen, so she's the co-founder of She's the First, which we'll get into what that is. Obviously the author of Impact. You just left the States not too long ago to get your MBA from the University of Oxford, which, holy crap, that's awesome. And something I did not know about you, and we'll have to get deep into this, Tamara, because we just did an episode on this, is you were part of the Barbie Global Advisory Council member. You were one of the members of that advisory council. So I'm going to need to know about that.
Oh my God. 100%.
So tell me, how did you get into nonprofit? Let's talk about She's the First and getting into nonprofit.
Yeah. Can I tell you my unpopular opinion before we go?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I prepped. I got ready. Okay. So my unpopular opinion is that I think, as your fractional chief impact officer, I actually think that philanthropy is really anti-democratic. Because the idea that we have, our wealth divide is just growing and growing and growing. And what that means is that we have more and more philanthropists who are able to give. And on the one hand, that's a beautiful thing. But on the other hand, it means that we have a growing class of people who can literally point their finger and say, okay, this community is going to get education. That community is going to get clean water. And I think there's something really strange about that. And I think it puts a lot of pressure then on the philanthropic sector and on people who want to engage in impact to do that with a lot of accountability. Because as this trend continues, and as we're able to kind of point and click who gets access to services, who gets access to beautiful libraries, who gets access to fill in the blank, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. So that's my
I love that unpopular opinion. It is something I fully support. I am a huge advocate for small business first. Like if you support small businesses, you actually rise economies, you raise communities, you do. So instead of, in my opinion, instead of grants, instead of philanthropy, it's like put your money where your values are, spend money at the businesses that you support on a local level, on a, that's where you're doing a lot of support. So I love your unpopular opinion. I'd love to know if other people think it's unpopular.
I do have to, I'll still put a plug in for the grants, just to be clear. I still think philanthropy is important, and I think it's a really good way for us to be involved in our local communities and to create change in the ways that the world needs to see it, particularly with where society is now. I think in my ideal society, philanthropy would be for fun, but that's not where we're at. We're in this position where the world needs a lot more than that. So we can get into how to do that for sure.
Love it.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a really great point. Obviously, I agree. And it's funny, when you first said it, I was like, I don't know that I understand. But once you explain yourself, you're like, yes, that's completely, I agree with you. And I think that it's hard, though, for some of the businesses who aren't big corporations or billion-dollar founders or unicorn companies to say, okay, do we put the business first? Do we put philanthropy first? Do we what's our mission? And one of the things that we're seeing in marketing, if we want to boil it back down just to marketing, is that authenticity within your message is going to bring you way further. A lot of times when I go into companies and they're like, we're not selling, or our product's really good once people know what we have, but like our website's not selling or our social's not connecting. A lot of times when I realize that internally their team is a little bit confused about the message, or there's some hesitation about the messaging out there and the mission out there, that's when people and consumers feel that lack of authenticity, right? So what's your feeling on if a business owner or business is trying to figure out like where philanthropy fits into their mission? Do they have to like wait till they're at a certain point before they can bring it in, or can they kind of pull it into the business model as a whole?
Yeah, so I think the first thing you need to do as a business owner, whether you're planning on kind of creating a for good business or you're opening a shoe shop down the street, is figuring out what are the values that you want this company to run by. And those values might be something like efficiency, or they might be something like justice, right? Like you get to decide, or you get to decide with your team, depending on how you're running things, what you want your value system to be for the company. And what that does is it kind of sets the parameters around, this is how we're going to run, this is how we're going to operate. And I think from there, then everything else you do aligns with and to those values. And just like in marketing generally, when we're thinking about, your message has to be true, has to be aligned, has to be authentic to what you actually do. When you think about your impact as a company, you want to do the same thing. So a lot of times what we see is that companies grow, they start to see some success, and then they think, okay, now I've got enough revenue. I want to think about the change I can create. I want to think about my impact. I want to start thinking about philanthropy. And I think what I'd encourage business owners to do is actually to go back to Tamara's point around thinking about the impact you already have with your business. If you are a small business owner, you are employing people. Are you paying them a fair salary? Are you giving them solid benefits? Are you creating a workplace that's actually going to help improve the community because of the opportunity that you're giving people? Is your product something that you can look at the sourcing for it and make sure that that's sustainable, that that's helping to ensure our planet isn't sliding ever faster into a dumpster fire? Yeah, like think about how your business is actually operating, and then think about, what are the ways that you can create impact within that world. And then from there, you can think about what are the causes that are really aligned with the work that you do. And you can think about adding philanthropy as another way to live out those values and another way to live out that mission. So if you're doing a lot of work with women and girls, you can align with an organization like She's the First. If you're doing work with kids on playgrounds, you can work with an organization like fly international, whatever the case might be. And I think what it does is you kind of look at it as part of your holistic value package. What you're offering to the world isn't just a product, it's a product and a set of values and kind of a way of being in the world that your company lives through its product, through its policies, through its team, and through its potentially philanthropy as well.
I love that. And, I can think of two examples, one that we've talked about, Nicole, and one that I used to talk about. So I don't have it completely updated, but because I used to talk about how like Timberland, the clothing company, right? Like they would give all their employees paid time off to volunteer and to do different projects within the community. And they're out there, they're wearing the gear, right? It is a way of giving back, but it's also a way of creating community within their their organization. And it's also a way of doing like PR. So it really does. If you've got it right and you know your values, you can do multiple things with your actions. And Nicole, you brought up, I remember one of the episodes we did, REI, giving everyone the day off on Thanksgiving, as opposed
Black Friday.
For Black Friday, instead of making their employees work, because they said, we think you should be at home or outside with your family. That's part of the value.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you're saying is just so on point, and there's so many ways to do it that can have different, a whole lot of impact on your employees and on the world with just simple actions that align with your values.
Yeah, and I think it also makes it more sustainable within the company. So if you might be somebody who owns a company, might also be somebody watching this who's on the marketing team, and you want to have more, initiatives for good. If you can find something that's values aligned, that makes sense with the company's brand, that makes sense with the values of the company, with the team, then it's something that can really live on for a long time. When I was still at She's the First, we had a bunch of different corporate givers and corporate partners. And some of those partners would come on for a year because it would be something kind of completely out of the blue. And they decided to give funds for She's the First. We were grateful for that. But, their team obviously the next year was like, why did we that doesn't make any sense. Who are we giving to this year? Is it the Red Cross? Is it this animal nonprofit? They're kind of all over the place. But the ones that were really aligned, so especially kind of the women's empowerment brands that were working with girls, brands that were working on global issues, those are the brands that tended to really stick around. And we could build a really authentic long-term partnership too. And you could see both kind of internally within their company, how the people who were championing that actually ended up doing really well, representing themselves to leadership, because leadership saw that they got it, right? Because it's that alignment. So I think thinking through those alignment pieces is a really great way, regardless of where you sit within that company hierarchy, to think about how you want to string impact in, because it makes it more sustainable kind of across the board.
Yeah. And I think that, we talk about values all the time, Tamara. I mean, every time we do a case study on something that went wrong, it's generally because a company either didn't stick to their values or tried to do a campaign based off of a trend that really didn't fit into their customer values, their product values, their team's values. And one of the things I was just before we started this, I was just telling everyone that I've been working on a corporate give back plan for a customer of ours. And we did some stats. So I have some stats here. So not surprising, 86% of employees prefer to work for companies that align with their values. So when we're talking about ROI of impact, yes, maybe you're going to get some new customers who are very loyal to the brand that you have. Maybe you are going to, use it for PR and earned media, but also we have to talk about the fact that it costs a lot of money to hire and train, and a lot of time to hire and train new people, and they're not as involved in the mission, and staff churn can be kind of dampened based on just this one thing of like having values and showing that you align to your values. So that's like we talk about like Zappos all the time in marketing case studies, right? And like their culture. And they really did that, right? That's how they built that, was the values. They said, hey, these are not just core values written on our wall. We're going to put our money where our mouth is. We're going to do it. And they saw a very insanely low churn rate. Do you see that throughout your kind of companies you work with?
Yeah, for sure. I think, going back actually to your unpopular opinion, Nicole, so many people do want to feel good about the work that they're doing. And not everyone ends up in the nonprofit sector, right? And so I think there is really this need and this desire for team members, no matter kind of where you work, to feel like you're contributing to something positive. And so what I've seen again and again is, particularly for the people who are on the team who are making that partnership happen, it's a really big deal to be able to work on kind of for purpose initiatives, whether that's volunteer days, whether that's finding a nonprofit partner, whether that's working on sustainability cycles. It's something that at the end of the day, you meet up with your friends and you get to say, hey, look at what I worked on today. And I think for all of the rest of the employees, whether they're working on that initiative or not, when they get to be involved in that volunteer day, or there's, you have the nonprofit founder come in and explain what the cause is that the company is giving to, or they have an opportunity to lend their skills, whatever kind of that engagement opportunity might be, I do think it makes a really big difference. I think, though, that engagement is pretty important. And I don't think it always has to be a day spent like painting the elementary school wall or whatever. It can be like a TED talk from a couple of people who are in that cause area. It can be, donating or dedicating skills. It can just be like making sure that all of the employees really understand, they kind of get videos and materials. They see what they're contributing to, or what their company is contributing to. But if your team doesn't know that it's happening, you're not going to see those benefits, right? And so just making sure that you're pulling along all of the employees as you're thinking about implementing something like this is pretty important.
I just have to add something from being on the other side of this. And at one point, so, a couple of the organizations that I've been a part of, we've done this in a really great way. And then I've seen it done in a really poor way as well, which is where it's mandated, and it's mandated on time like your time off.
Oh, no.
Right? And there's nothing more demoralizing that can like ruin team spirit than requiring people to come in on a Saturday to go to a nursing home, right? Like that. So
the old people don't deserve that, they deserve people who want to be there.
Yeah. And so I think too, you do have to think through it. Like we talk a lot about budgets, and when you want to do something, you have to do it right. Don't try and shortcut it or shortchange it in any way. So with that, make sure that you're doing it in a way that your employees or your team actually want to be excited about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I think the other thing, we talked about this in one of our episodes, Tamara, about like, okay, I'm going to take a step back. Christen, you said something that made me think of one of our episodes where you're saying about how making sure, I think it's a great first step to make sure that it aligns with something you're already doing or that you're already a part of. Because I think that this impact and having impact in entrepreneurship is something that can be really unattainable sounding or really scary or really big, right? And I know that from working with other entrepreneurs and talking to friends who are entrepreneurs, like our big thing in life is like wanting to make an impact on the world. And I know that like for me, I struggled a lot sometimes with, okay, should I have been like a doctor and actually saving lives? Should I, what am I actually doing? I'm a marketer, right? But then when I talk to some mentors and things like that, they talk about how, no, you're giving jobs to people. You're building a community. My dad was very big on, our employees, they can send their kids to band camp because you're paying them you know, a living salary that they can go and do things with their families and feed their families and, you know, spend money at other local businesses, right? So not just does this have to align with what you're doing, but also you have a community that you can align with. And maybe it's not on a global scale that you're having impact, but the community, maybe you do co-branded events and you are now bringing new people from your community into your, you know, introducing them to your product, to your business, but you're also, you know, giving back to that community that's coming. And one of the stats that I have here is that as of 2023, matching gift programs were actually used by 65% of Fortune 500 companies. And they saw that as a valuable engagement tool for their employees. So like 16 to 20% of their employees were actually involved in matching gifts. I know Microsoft, they do, if you volunteer, they'll actually pay you for every hour, not pay you, they'll pay the charity for every hour you volunteer. They'll match your gift, and you get certain days off a year that you can go volunteer, right? So checking with, if you work for a company, checking to see if they have these giving programs. If you want to start these giving programs, there's lots of stats out there to help you convince the higher ups that it's worth it. And if you have your own company, think through the community that you are a part of right now and what can they use and what can they, you know, be a part of that can also help, you know, good karma, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, I think, you know, often we think about creating impact, we think about philanthropy, and we think about dollars, right? And dollars are beautiful, and if you have them, I encourage you to give them. But you also have a lot of other resources at your disposal. So I am sure from being a human in 2024, you've seen the number of nonprofits that could really use some marketing help and could really use some marketing volunteer work, advice, all of that, right? You know, volunteering to do some comms work, volunteering to help with events, all of those kinds of things that are naturally in a marketer's skill sets are also things that a lot of nonprofits, especially volunteer run ones, really struggle with. And so if you have a company that is, you know, locally based, that's a physical company, have a look around at the various other nonprofits that work in that community too. Do you have physical space that people could use for events? You know, do you have leftover materials that might be of use, right? There's so many things that you can give that allow you then to kind of tie more deeply into the community that you're surrounded by. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. You know, as a business owner or somebody who's working for a small business, if you can tie your business into the fabric of the local community by, you know, either partnering with those organizations, by supplying them with things that they might need, that is a win-win scenario because you've got that kind of kickback in goodwill and community relationships and community ties and all of those things that we know we want and need to be successful. And I think, you know, if you work for a bigger firm or a bigger outfit, still thinking about, you know, then you've really got some resources to give. You've got the conference rooms, you've got the event spaces, you know, you probably have an event budget. You know, could you host or throw an event, a small event for a nonprofit that's aligned with your company's values? So thinking outside the box, particularly if it's your first foray into figuring out, okay, where do I go? How do I figure this out? Thinking about what else you have at your disposal is another way to kind of break into this. It doesn't have to be that you're giving $500,000 a year every year to XYZ nonprofit to begin with. Eventually you'll get there, of course.
Eventually. Tamara, unless you have another question here, I'm going to make a sharp left or right turn here a little bit. Okay,
I'm loving this conversation, so I will let you take the turn. I think it's such a valuable one to have.
Yeah, we're going to have like a part 2 because there's no way we're going to keep this down to under 40 minutes or whatever we try to do. But where I want to go with this is that a lot of the people watching are, like I said, entrepreneurs, they're fractionals, or they're marketers who work as CMOs, directors. Maybe they're thinking about going into fractional. Maybe they're thinking about moving their or pivoting their business in a different direction. You had a successful, very successful nonprofit that you were running, and you I don't want to say gave it up, but you decided to pivot into a whole nother realm. And not just pivot leaving She's the First, moving on to, doing what you're doing now, but also leaving the country and moving to London and England. Can you talk a little bit about like that decision? And like, I think that if we're talking about unpopular opinions, I think that it's really hard for people, especially entrepreneurs, to realize that it's time to pivot, or to realize that like give up that really stable job to become a fractional, even though that's what you want to do. Can you talk a little bit about that from a personal standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. So I decided it was time. So for background, I had co-founded She's the First back in 2009, and I left in 2022. So she was 13 when I when I moved on. But in a lot of ways, I think the organization had just gotten to a point where everything I was doing, there was somebody else on the team who was just as capable of doing it, and actually probably had fresher ideas and definitely had fresher energy to bring to it. And I was finding that the things I was most interested in, the things that were most lighting me up, tended to be the kind of top level organizational strategic questions, rather than the kind of day to day that was a lot of my job and a lot of my role. And the kind of real moment, I think, came actually during COVID, because during COVID we all of a sudden had this scenario where girls and women were facing the same challenge everywhere around the world at the same time, with global lockdowns. And the implications of that, with domestic violence, with lack of access to school, with kind of slide backs from that, serious concerns about access to food, and money for the household and those kinds of things. That was global. That was happening everywhere around the world all at once. And so it was the biggest moment, I think, that She's the First had faced in our entire history. And when we got through the other side of it, I realized that, as stressful as the situation was, every step along the way felt actually very, very confident in every decision that I was making. Like, the ability to make decisions for the organization was something that I had kind of reached my peak of being able to do. And so even though I loved and continue to love the organization, I will never again find a work wife as good as Tammy Tibbetts, my co-founder. She's the First. Like, it's just never going to happen again. The team is brilliant. Like, it was the best job I could have asked for. But I realized that I wasn't being challenged anymore in the ways that I really had come to love being challenged in those kind of preceding 13 years that She's the First. And that told me, okay, maybe it's time. But I knew the founders listening might relate. I knew I couldn't just go into another job. Like, there was no way I would be able to do that. And so I wanted this bucket. I wanted like space and time to really think about who I was outside of She's the First, and also then maybe what I might want to do after as well. And so I ended up taking the year and going and doing an MBA at Oxford, which did just give me the space to kind of get interested in different aspects of impact in business and just follow them down the rabbit hole, all of them. Right? And that was an incredible way to spend a year, was just every time an interesting thought popped up, to just chase it down that hole until I figured out everything I wanted to learn about it. And then I'd pop up and I'd see another rabbit and I'd go down that hole. And I think it just gave me the breathing room to start imagining other possibilities for myself. Because even though while I was at She's the First, I knew that my time there was coming to an end and that was the right thing, I also wasn't really sure like what the world looked like. I also think, as entrepreneurs, we often we talk about our organizations like they're our babies, right? And it feels like that. But I think that there's also kind of this sense of, if that's true, you also have to recognize when that baby might need something different. And at She's the First, we were a global organization, but with work moving more and more into the global South. And so we, at the time I was making this decision to transition, we also decided we would be transitioning headquarters to our Nairobi office. And so that transition too meant a different kind of leadership, right? And a different kind of leadership profile. And so that transition is still in process and is kind of coming to a close now, which is really exciting. But there was kind of there were these two elements of what I needed personally, and then also what the organization needed that really came together. I could ramble about this at you for years, but I will say, if you are someone who's considering a pivot like this, if you were a founder, one of the best things I did was bring in a coach, both for me and for the other leaders at She's the First, to help us transition and figure out, like, what does this new world look like, and how do we get there without breaking, right? Like, how do we set ourselves up for long-term success?
That's so smart. I was going to ask you about that, because it's like, it's such a very hard thing, especially when you're the founder, not just like the leader, right? Like, being a founder is different than just being the CEO of an organization. You are just so entangled in what that organization is. You're usually the face of it as well. So leading that transition and making it clean has to be so tricky. Any tips from the coach that you got, like any like key takeaways that made this a little bit better?
So one of the things I did working with my coach was, in the back of my notebook, my kind of daily, to-do notebook, I kept a tally of all of the times I stepped into a situation that I really didn't have to step into, where like the team definitely could have handled it without me, but I decided like I just had to share this one thought or this one idea. And by doing that, it showed me, as much as I thought I was kind of taking this gradual step back, I wasn't really always. And so I think identifying those ways that you're finding it difficult to let go, and then finding ways to actually track them. Because as soon as I had to go to the back of my notebook and put a tally every time I did it, like immediately down a cliff. And I was then the person who sat in the meeting. It was just,
I think that's actually a good, that's even a good like exercise for people who are, for founders whose businesses are growing, or even directors whose businesses are growing, because a lot of times the biggest hurdle when I come in as a marketing team or as a fractional CMO is the founder or business owner, like not being able to delegate something. And I think it would actually be a really great, I always tell them to track their time, because people are like, wait, where did all my time go? I was really busy. And it's like, okay, you're busy, but are you productive? And I think it's the same thing here, right? Like, yes, you're needed and you are an important part of the team, but did you need to be part of that part of the workday?
I think it's so interesting too, because it goes back to one of the discussions that I've been having on like an ongoing basis, is how do you raise up the next generation of leaders, the next generation of creatives, and it's about giving them the space, right? But especially in this remote world, we like constantly want to be jumping in and not letting, people who are trying to sort through their process, their ideas, their creativity. We don't necessarily give them the opportunity. So if we do, like, I'm going to get my notebook, I'm going to start doing tallies for myself so that I can make sure that my team is doing stuff on their own so that they grow and learn.
Exactly. Yeah. And look, I think it's scary because, it means that you are opening yourself and the company up to making mistakes, right? Like, if you're allowing your team to make the decision and to run with it, then there is always kind of an element of risk there. But there's also the possibility of just incredible surprises and incredible creativity, and the opportunity to see people grow into those roles and do things in a way maybe different from how you would have done it, but in a better way. One of my favorite things now is seeing a social media post or something from She's the First pop up about some like new program or new initiative or new partner that I don't even know. And it's this moment of like, wow, it's like you've kind of set your little boat into the into the river, and now it's like way down there around the curve, and you're just watching it go, and it's sailing successfully. And that's
very
a
much
really,
like
really cool
parenting.
feeling.
It's very much like parenting. I'm just thinking, like, it's literally like some of the stuff that I'm going through with my daughter, where it's like she wants to cook now, and you're just like, it's a knife, right? But at some point she has to learn how to use it. And so when do you do that? When do you set it free and go, okay, try it?
I was just gonna like full circle moment us for a second, because I just had a full circle moment here. In my family, we always had the rule that even if you messed up, as long as you were acting with the family's best interest in mind, like we wouldn't get in trouble. And I think it's the same thing here, right? We talked about core values, and we talked about, I think a lot of companies, they do core values because it's something you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to put on your wall, and you're supposed to put on your website. But if you truly make core values a team building exercise where everyone's involved, you make it where everyone understands what those core values are, and then you tell and you really train them to say it's okay to make a mistake as long as you're not acting outside of what the core values are. Because even if you do make a mistake in a company, you're gonna make mistakes. And even if you do, as long as they're within your core values and you can defend that, we didn't act outside of what we believe in, you can recover from that. You can pivot, you can change. And I think that kind of brings it just full circle for us.
No, it's so true. And I think we have to be careful with the trend of like companies describing themselves as families, right? But I do it's true. The idea that if you make a mistake while acting in the best interest of the company, and you've done that, with reasonable amounts of research, and you've kind of done the legwork, and you've taken a mitigated risk, then yeah, of course, it's just not going to work out every time. But sometimes it will, and that's really, really cool when it hits.
Yeah. Well, first off, congratulations that it takes a lot of bravery to make a pivot and to realize that you are not the right person to take the company to the next level. And I'm sure you would have done great even if you stayed. But, for founders, we were just talking about this the other day, Tamara, about how founders who don't take on the position of CEO because they realize I got into it to be CMO, or I got into it to, be the product designer. I have a lot of respect, because it's really hard to not go from founder to CEO and not to realize when it's time to give it up. But you also moved across the world here. What is business? Is business different in London? Tell us if it's slightly different from the United States.
It is different. I think there's a saying that the UK and the US are two countries divided by a common language, because we think we understand each other, but ships passing in the night. And so I think, even though I thought coming to London it would be quite similar culturally, there definitely have been, elements to get used to. But that's something that, because I spent so much time traveling the world with Choose the First, I was lucky enough to get pretty comfortable and starting to understand other cultures, and just kind of starting to understand the markers of, how are you supposed to introduce yourself? How are you supposed to make small talk? How are you supposed to, how do those things happen in a given society? And so that's been really fun and really interesting. I think, when it comes to impact, the UK and Europe are pretty far ahead of the US in a lot of ways in terms of environmental impact and sustainability. There are a lot more regulations and a lot more policies here that companies have to adhere to. And there are also, there are bigger social safety nets. And so what you find is that traditionally the levels of giving here in the UK are much lower than they traditionally have been and are in the US. They're starting to even out a bit. So more and more people in the UK are starting to give, which I think is a good thing. I think it helps to make you feel connected and with your community, and, for all of the reasons we've spoken about already. But that was an interesting part, kind of, coming here and working in the impact space, was starting to see and understand, okay, it's actually not necessarily given that a company is going to have a philanthropic arm, right? Or it's not necessarily a given that individuals are even going to give to charities at the level or at the rate that they do in the US. And so those are some elements that have definitely been interesting. There's also fewer organizations here. You know, the US has many, many, many nonprofit organizations. This is a stat I should probably learn and know. But just per capita, there are a ton of organizations. And in the UK, that's just not a comparable number.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we could talk about this forever, and we're getting to time here. So I want to ask you about this Barbie Global Advisory Council member that I found out from looking at your LinkedIn. I never knew about this. What is this?
So remember when Barbie diversified her body type?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when they came out with that line of dolls, which was called the Fashionista, it might still actually be called the Fashionista line of Barbies. What they were looking to do was to create a series of Barbies that no longer looked like Barbie, right? Yep. So the idea being that we could create something different. And it was interesting because at the time, I think the first time, so I sat on their council twice, and the first time was right before these dolls came out. I want to say it was 2015. And I was a little hesitant because for me, Barbie did represent that kind of body image ideal. And I wasn't sure about working with the company initially because I was worried about them, you know, essentially kind of using my name, my co-founder's name, other organizational leaders in the girls' space to say, like, this is fine. You don't have to worry about anything. But we had a couple of talks with their team, and they were really interested in understanding from our perspective the kind of the pitfalls and the potential issues and kind of what they weren't thinking about yet. And when I went into that engagement, I was really, really surprised and really, really impressed with the amount of research that Mattel had done working with girls, especially young girls, so girls ages like 3 to 7 or so, on understanding kind of what they were getting out of play and how Barbie was contributing to, you know, ideas of what they could be or limiting ideas of what they could be. And their research ended up revolving around this idea, this finding called the dream gap, which is this idea that at around age 5, girls stop saying, you know, if you ask a 3-year-old girl what she wants to be when she grows up, she might tell you she wants to be a dinosaur. She might tell you she wants to be an astronaut. She wants to become president. She wants to be a princess. She wants to, you know, whatever she wants to do. Her imagination, like, literally knows no bounds. But around the ages 5 to 7, girls are increasingly exposed to media, and that media has a lot of messages about who and what they can be. And so what you find is that around those ages, girls start telling you that they want to be a teacher, and girls start telling you that they want to be a nurse, and girls start telling you that they want to be, you know, kind of fill in the blank with professions that we often see women sitting in. And there's nothing wrong, of course, with any of those positions, but there is something wrong with girls no longer reaching for the imagination positions of actually, I can be anything, I can do anything, let alone the implications for just kind of gendered careers and that kind of thing. And so these dolls were part of this kind of larger research effort to reshape how girls saw themselves and make sure that girls could see themselves in these dolls that they're playing with, because you probably remember that Barbie, like, has a million different careers. She has been everything. And so one of the things Mattel wanted to do was make sure that when they had, you know, Barbie the sea captain, I don't think that's existed yet, but it should. Or like Barbie,
I think she was not captain, but yes.
Amazing. Yes. Barbie the coder, which does exist, right? Like, that it's not just one image of Barbie, kind of white, tall, hourglass Barbie, but that girls could actually see themselves in it. Anyway, that's a lot of conversation, but I'm really impressed with how the brand has thought through, to kind of full circle back to our earlier conversation, what it is that they're putting into the world and how they can create an impact actually through that product and with that product. And then what they did was, in addition to the work that they did on the doll itself, they partnered with organizations, including She's the First for a bit, to make sure that they were funding programs for girls in that age range, to provide them with mentorship, to provide them with opportunities to kind of see themselves reflected and more opportunities than they traditionally might have.
Wow.
I like that, because we can have another conversation on that. That's a whole case study on how to do good research for releasing a product
Yeah.
in a thoughtful, meaningful, impactful way.
And I'm surprised, exactly, Tamara, you didn't say feedback loop, because I know that you're a sucker for a good feedback loop, and that's like a perfect feedback loop. But also, we just did a whole episode on the Barbie movie and the marketing team and all of those pieces. And it's funny because in all of the research and all of that, we never, thought about or heard about these pieces. And so when we're talking about impact, like we started this conversation, it's not just about the money. It's not just about the impact that you're having in a very like public setting. It's also about the impact. This is a great case study on a company really taking their core values to heart and doing that next step that maybe they don't get as much of the credit for, but they're actually doing the good. Next week, is it next week or the week after, we have a live, actually not next week, right after 4th of July, we have a live with one of my co-founders from Exceptional Ed. And she's going to be talking about accessibility in your company and how do you bring inclusivity from the disability community into the company. And once again, another way to build impact that's not very public facing, but it's really just doing the right thing in the world.
Yeah. And I think too, people often get really hung up on the idea that if you're going to create impact, it has to be perfect. And we often treat companies like that, right? Like, I think there probably are a number of things that people are happy to critique about Barbie and about Mattel at large and their impact in the world. But I think, for me, the most important thing is that as business leaders, we're constantly trying to do better, right? And so I do think that is something Barbie has been doing. Is there room to improve? Yeah. I also expect that they recognize that and that they're going to keep taking steps. And I think that's really what we want to push for from the companies that we're supporting or we're purchasing from. And that's also what we want for our own companies. You don't have to have impact down perfectly. You just have to start. You have to do something. Let yourself learn about how to do impact in a way that makes sense for your company, and then learn from it and do it a little bit better next year and add something on next year and keep adding to it and keep building. And I think, don't let perfect get in the way of better, right? Is the phrase. Like, just do something, I think, is kind of the goal.
I guess we should add, when I was doing the research for the Barbie movie case study that we did, there was, Mattel had a reason for doing the research and for starting this. It was because their sales had completely plummeted because they weren't relevant at the time, because they hadn't taken actions to modernize and to be more. So like there was a business reason, but it doesn't mean that what they did, like doing the right thing, shouldn't also be applauded. They then took the right steps to make a better product that was better for, not only making money for themselves, but also for the people that they were serving, which is girls.
Yeah. And we're always living in this tension, right? Like, as a business owner, as somebody who's working is in part of a big company or a small company, wherever you sit in the world, you're going to have this tension between making money, creating impact. What does that look like, and how do we do it? And I think that they're often, or usually, not going to be easy or perfect solutions to those questions, because we live in a capitalist society. There's a lot of exploitation that happens. There's a lot of issues with the world, and your single company is probably not going to be able to fix them. But you can recognize those tensions and you can recognize those trade-offs, and you can start to make better choices, and choices that, will allow your business to thrive, but also allow your business to create good in the world, right? And so kind of threading the needle and making those decisions with intentionality, understanding the kind of long-term effects of the decisions that you make, making the decision with that in mind, all of those pieces. So yeah, no one's expecting you to, like open up a monastery and start giving out bread. Like that's not what we need your business to be.
Yeah.
But I do think, thinking about, as we said before, thinking about your product, thinking about your policies and your team, your HR, thinking about your philanthropy, how do all of those pieces fit together as a whole? That's something that you can do a lot with.
And I think that this is just I won't go down the rabbit hole, but this is a perfect case study for implementing kind of review moments in your business, right? Because every day as business owners, we're making small decisions that are either going to get us closer or further away from whatever that initial mission was. We've all started businesses. I would say not all, but like 90% of people start businesses not just to make money, but to solve a problem for people in the world. And, a lot of these case studies like, Theranos and all of these, what I call business true crimes, right? All these case studies that are like business gone bad, when you really look at it, they didn't set out to do that. There were these small decisions that got them further away. No one said, hey, maybe we should stop and think about this for a second. And like, how close or far away are we from our mission? And it's the same thing here, right? You make the decision, same thing as marketing, right? We make the assumption, we validate or discredit our assumption, then we pivot. Same thing with impact, right? Just get started, find a way to abide by your core values, to help your community, even in a small little bit, and then start, seeing how that works. Checks and balances, right? I don't know. We're just going to start saying words now. But anyway, with that being said, the one question I always ask everyone, this will be the final question. The one question I've been asking everyone is, if someone is working towards adding impact into their business or working with a fractional impact officer or whatever that looks like, what is a red flag that they should be looking out for in this space?
I think we talk a lot about greenwashing, but I think this happens kind of all across the impact space, which is that you hold up the shiny impact object over here. It's like this flashy volunteer day, and you completely forget about everything else that's happening across the business. And I think that is a really scary trend. I think you do want to be working with someone, or if you're implementing this yourself, you want to be thinking about, what is happening with HR and team members, what is happening with our salary levels, what is happening with our product, all of those pieces. It's, impact in your business is not just the volunteer engagement day. It's a lot more than that. So that's what you want to be looking at. And I think you also want somebody who understands the business as a whole, and is interested in how impact fits into the business as a whole, and isn't just this kind of separate, ugly stepchild or shiny stepchild, as the case might be.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I knew it was going to be. If people are listening and they want to work with you or they want to reach out, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at alignstrategies.co, or at CJ Brandt on basically all of the social media.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We have new episodes, so go subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are now on anywhere you listen to podcasts, so Spotify, Apple, Android, all of the places. We are also have a really great growing community on LinkedIn, so come join us there. And happy marketing.
Happy marketing. And if you have case studies, drop them in our LinkedIn. Like, we would love to read them and share them.
Perfect. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.